All right, Agent Talk. Today, my guest is a guy who probably knows more about SaaS pricing than anyone else in the planet. He is a HubSpot exec. He's a co-founder of PricingSaaS and a diehard Longhorns fan. I am super excited to be talking to him. We have a lot of spicy stuff to cover. There's a lot of changes in the pricing world, in SaaS, in agent, in AI. And I can't wait to interview and really learn from the mastermind of good, better, Rob Litterst. Rob, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Manny. That's a very generous introduction. I appreciate it.
Well, so let's get right into it. So what is changing in pricing? So is seat pricing dead or not dead? Is SaaS pricing dead or kind of alive and thriving? So walk us through what's going on in the last few months since agent and AIs are being the talk of the town.
Yeah, I think like there are a few things that I'm looking at really closely. I think one of them is kind of how the value spectrum is changing and how pricing is moving closer to values and to actual value delivered. And I think like a few different ways to look at that are outcome-based pricing, like the kind of gap from seat-based pricing to outcome-based pricing and how people are pushing along that. And I think that there are a lot of ways that companies are doing that and kind of taking baby steps now. I think there have been some pretty splashy headlines around like Salesforce with Agentforce and Intercom has been kind of one of the pioneers there with their outcome-based pricing. But I think there are a lot of ways that companies can move in that direction without going fully towards outcomes, and kind of take a more conservative line towards that ultimate outcome. But I think you're 100% right. I think AI, like I'm writing about this in my newsletter today. I've always thought of this packaging strategy that I think I learned from Russell Brunson at one point. It's called the value ladder. And it's like, tier 1 is do it yourself. Tier 2 is do it with our help. And tier 3 is we'll do it for you. And I think that packaging structure has always been a lot more relevant for services companies and agencies than SaaS, because SaaS could never actually do a job for you. But I think that's the big thing that's changing is like AI agents are making it so that you actually can do jobs. So what I'm seeing is obviously companies moving towards outcomes, but there are a couple different ways that I think you can do that before you actually get to outcome-based pricing. One of them that I covered a couple weeks ago is Confluence. So they released a new value metric called automation run rules, which is basically them doing like handling tasks for you in the background in an automated fashion, right? So like they basically started limiting the number of automation run rules that you can have in each plan. So they're not charging for outcomes, but they're starting to include outcomes within their seat-based model, which I think is really cool because it keeps the existing model that they have. But now that model also includes like a certain amount of work that they're going to do for you in the background. And the amount of work and the volume of work changes as you upgrade to new plans.
So does that increase the price per seat then? Is that how they're getting around the fact that if you do more work, you have less seats?
So I don't think they actually increase the price per seat yet, but I'm sure they will. Like I think this is a kind of a new thing that they're adding that's at just kind of like a pure value add at this point. But I would imagine that they'll probably increase prices. The other thing about Confluence is their price is very dynamic based on the number of people that are using Confluence. So I was looking at it for one section of their like GTM, like I think like 300 plus users. So I didn't see the price change there, but there's obviously a chance that they changed it for, lower tier users or down market customers or something like that.
Right. So YC put out a request for ideas or for companies to come in. Mm-hmm. And they put the rationale, right? One of the rationale behind AI agents is that AI agents are replacing people and software as a whole. So if people are being replaced along with the software that comes with it, how do you price that? Like, how do you price that package of the person plus the software?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. This is crazy timely because I'm writing about this today. So I think there's a lot, like I think humans are basically becoming a premium feature is my take on it. And I think like one of the changes that I saw recently, so there's this company BotPress that like helps you launch AI agents. And one of the pricing changes that I saw a couple of weeks ago is they released this new dedicated support for launching white label agents. So I looked at that and I was like, wait, what? Like, so they're basically they're saying our humans are going to help you replace your humans. Basically, like that's how I read that. And so like, I think that sort of GTM is going to happen. Like, I think they're going to be kind of like default setting, like agent applications that people can use themselves. But I think if you really want to take it to the next level, you're going to need to use humans to ramp this up. and even Salesforce. So they launched Agentforce, but they have a big professional services product called Agentforce Activator that I think is probably really popular right now. And I see what YC is saying, but I'm in a big tech company that has a lot of headcount, and we're just thinking about hiring AI agent engineers. Like, I don't think a lot of companies are hiring AI agent engineers yet. And until that becomes commonplace in a default setting, I still think humans have a huge role to play in getting this up and running.
Got it. But this is an interesting point. So in your mind, humans are the premium product.
I think
I think agents doing a bunch of work, and then you get upgraded to a human being at some point. Is that how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, so I think in some ways, like, agents commoditize software, like that they're commoditizing like the software part of everything, right? And it's like it's instead of differentiating your tiers based on features and like usage limits, we're entering a new world where you can differentiate by like either volume of work done or quality of work done. And it's like the agents can get you like not super far on those lines right now. It will improve, I'm sure, inevitably. But I think right now it's like the agents can get you from like A to B, and then the human takes you from like B to C, like C to D, et cetera, et cetera. And another example I would say is like, so User Gems has this outbound AI agent, right? And they charge, I think, like 10,000.
Who doesn't? Let's start with that. Like, everybody has one of those flavors.
Right, exactly. So they charge like 10,000 for that, but then their enterprise plan, they charge 25,000 for, and it's like human support to help you with contract red lines, like all these things that AI agents aren't sophisticated enough to handle on like a custom basis at this point. And so like, I think that's what you're going to see is like the agent handles this kind of like volume of work that's quote unquote easier. And then the humans kind of step in, handle the nuances.
So how is that different from the same path that we went down as post-industrial age, workers, right? So we used to get paid by the hour, right?
Uh-huh.
Yes, you show up, you get paid for the time that you spend in the factory. That's the same thing as like humans of like agents getting paid by consumption. Then we got paid a salary because we were worth, more than just the hours were there. And the same thing, agents are getting priced by the agent right now. Eventually, we got bonuses and incentives and other things that aligns us to value. So how are the agents gonna is the agent gonna follow the same path as the human post-industrial revolution did, or are they taking a completely different vector because they're software and they're not people?
So I think that's where like the pricing element comes in, right? And I think like he used to call this like skin in the game pricing. Like I think like Substack was one of the first companies that I was thinking about here. Patreon, like they don't make money unless you make money, right? And so like I think that model can be applied to B2B SaaS at a certain point. I think it's going to be very dependent on what space you're in B2B SaaS. Like there are spaces like customer support right now where you can charge per resolution, right? And like you can define what a resolution is and you can charge based on that. And so you're essentially being paid based on outcomes, right? And I think like that's going to happen in more areas of SaaS. And I think that's probably where we end up going, where it's like, okay, if a agent is helping you close X amount of new MRR or whatever, then you're going to be paid based on a commission rate based on that MRR. I think it'll depend on the space, but yeah.
Dude, every time I post on LinkedIn about outcome-based pricing, there's at least half the comments who are like, no, this was never going to happen. It's too hard. We tried it in the past. It's not going to work. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that's an extremely short-sighted viewpoint. And I'm not like the most, like it took me a little while to get into AI, like I'm like, I've been using it a ton now, but I'm not like the craziest AI bull in the world. And I think it's just inevitable that we're going to get there. Like based on the progress that we've seen over the last couple of years, I think outcome-based pricing is definitely coming. And I think it's just a matter of time before we can kind of like define and figure out the parameters for what successful outcomes look like. And agents are able to handle that and do that. I definitely think it's coming.
So do you think that then, so the people who can figure out what outcomes are, is that just laziness? Or it's just, the CFO is not going to get around to it. And you want to get through procurement quick and procurement doesn't know what to do with it. So we just go back to whatever they're used to. Like, which one is it?
Yeah. So I think depending on your company and like what you're selling, an outcome can be pretty specific or an outcome can be pretty nuanced and hard. And I think it's I think a lot of the people that are probably loudest in your comments in LinkedIn are the ones who are looking at like hard outcomes. And I think that's probably true. Like some of these outcomes are going to take a lot longer for AI to fully complete, right? But we're already seeing some of these like discrete tasks that AI agents can handle. And I think like to your point about the CFOs like being kind of skeptical about outcome-based pricing, I think there are ways where outcome-based pricing generates more revenue than your existing model, right? Like all of the threads that I'm seeing about intercom pricing are that it's extremely expensive. Like all the people that are using Fin AI agent are saying that it's very expensive relative to what they were paying before. And so I think it's not going to happen all in one fell swoop. And I think like the example from Confluence I mentioned earlier is a way to kind of take a baby step towards outcome-based pricing. Another company, Chili Piper, released add-ons that are outcome-based that ladder up to their per seat pricing as well. So I think like that's kind of the next step is like you start by including some kind of like outcome-based metric within your plan that ladders up to your existing plan. Then you move towards like an add-on that's fully charged based on outcomes. And I think that's what Intercom did as well. And then as you kind of start to see it, like test and see the results there, you get more and more comfortable making that your model. I think the flip of the switch with some of these companies that have gone really hard into it is going to be kind of the rare way to do it. I think it's going to be more gradual across the rest of the market. But
so what do you say? So all the examples you gave me are customer facing applications, right? Support, sales. What happens to the back office stuff? Like the stuff that is replacing functions or roles or a set of tasks that were frankly grinding people's gears, right? Like this is just relieving people to go do better work. How is that going to get priced?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know as much about those spaces and those functions, but my specialty or my expertise has been in sales, marketing, like customer facing roles. So I gravitate towards those kinds of products naturally. But I think the back office stuff, from what I've read, has a more immediate time horizon on what you can actually do. And like I've read about CFOs using AI to ultimately surface trends in their financials from like 10 years before that they weren't seeing. And I think there's, you talk about like Harvey AI, the legal AI product replacing like, a whole new class of associates. I think it's really interesting how those products are going to evolve, especially when the job is basically like looking over documentation and like comparing like comparing certain things to, whatever like the current document, the old documentation might be. Like, I think those are things that AI can do incredibly well and are super ripe for disruption.
So if the path of a professional, right, of a white collar professional, is you start in the lower rungs and you are an associate and sort of like an apprentice and you'll work your way up to like knowledge and expertise over time. And if AI is if this is happening everywhere, right? So AI in coding, like Replit, Cursor, even Vercel's V0, like they're all replacing the entry level engineer. Harvey is replacing the entry level associate. I was talking to somebody else that, they're replacing like the entry level, the people who are filling out the paperwork and different kinds of tasks. So what happened to those people? How do they become how do they get their runs in, their reps so that they can become experts?
I think that's an awesome question. I don't know. Like I think about this with my kids. I mean, I have two kids. And
so why do you advise them to go do?
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, they're 4 and 1, so I have no idea where this is going to be in a few years, but or in 2 decades when they're in the workforce. But I think about this all the time. Like we're building PricingSaaS, and John, my partner, uses Lovable, and he built like our entire product in like 2 weeks with Lovable. So it's unbelievable.
That's incredible. Exactly. And Lovable is just like one of the many. There are many there, and they're all amazing. They're all amazing applications.
It's really, really crazy to think. Like I think developer was always the role that you felt like was kind of like future proof. Like just go learn computer engineering and you're going to be fine no matter what. And even they're not safe right now with AI. So I don't know. I mean, I think like selfishly, I think generalists are in a decent place. Like if you can kind of like bridge the gaps and connect the dots between a few places, which like that's been my kind of like accidental career path. I've bounced around a bunch and like, worked in a few different functions and learned a little bit here, a little bit there. I think that can be one approach. I also think like, they've been talking a lot about like the blue collar type roles, like plumbing, electricians, that sort of stuff.
Right. That's coming back.
It's coming back hot now. Big time.
And, we were just through a labor shortage. Totally. So it's going to be good to know that you can call a plumber and they show up the same day, perhaps, who knows, maybe next week.
100%. And it's going to be interesting because like, for the longest time, it's like, teachers and jobs like that haven't been paid what people think that they deserve to be paid, and now it's like all these white collar jobs are going to get it, man. It's kind of crazy.
That's amazing. So it's funny because I see 3 paths the AI has taken in terms of like labor. I'm gonna call it labor reimagining, not because it's not replacing yet. So like one is the BPOs, the business process outsourcers, they're gone. Like AI agents are like the apex predator in that game, right? Like if you can do it cheaper somewhere else, AI can do it even cheaper,
Totally.
in the computer. So those, whether you're dialing or you're a, call center or you are an appointment maker, gone. So
Absolutely.
the second one, which is actually interesting, is that there's a relieving labor shortage in parts of the economy that they were having a hard time hiring people, like insurance adjusters, just insurance agents in general. Like they require some amount of like human touch to understand like what is the right priorities for you to design the insurance around you. And I'm sure AI can take that over, but it's not there yet. You know what I mean? And nobody wakes up, nobody at 5, when you're 7 or 8, you don't say like, what I want to grow up? I want to be an insurance adjuster. Nobody says
Yeah.
that, right? So like, they
Be an
really got to be
actuary. Yeah, exactly.
exactly actuary. Like nobody says that, right? So those are really interesting, but this is a one-way train, right? Like, so some of these roles are being performed by people right now, and they will stop at some point.
Yeah. This
And
I'm so curious to see where it goes. I mean, like Mark Andreessen just wrote about this. I made it like halfway through his post on Substack, but he was talking about how he doesn't think that humans are going to lose jobs because of AI. And he's like, this has been the fear at every single point of like the technological revolution. And I don't know what his point is, but I'm excited to read it because I don't see how it happens, man. I don't know I don't know how it's going to happen.
yeah, so tell me, let's go back to SaaS is dead. So you were being a big proponent that SaaS is dead. Tell me how dead it is and who killed it and what's that?
So I don't necessarily think SaaS is dead. I think the way that people used to charge for in SaaS is getting kind of a reawakening, whether they like it or not. I just think like I've thought for a really long time, like obviously like the kind of first wave of SaaS, it was like there were only a few companies who were kind of handling like these big categories, right? You get like the Workday, you get like Salesforce. And then beyond that, it was kind of like product plus product marketing, like figuring out what your niche is like within those bigger categories, right? And so it's like your product marketing and positioning, I think, could take you a really long way there. And then from there, I thought, as the market gets more and more crowded, like everybody's seen that visual of, the marketing software landscape in like 2010 and then the marketing software landscape in like 2016. It's like it goes from like 100 companies to like 5,000 companies. And I've thought for a really long time that, the next level, the next wave of it, like once there are like a million companies doing every single thing, is aligning pricing and packaging and the actual kind of like incentive model with the customer and figuring out the best way to do that. So like that's where I think pricing and packaging can be so important and so impactful is you can actually position your company to be the best option for the users that you're trying to serve, right? And it goes beyond just marketing and what your product can do. If you can actually align your incentives with your customers' incentives, I think it's really interesting. And there were ways to do that before AI agents, but AI agents have just
But
taken it
that's where
to
I
a
was gonna
completely
go.
different
Like
level.
this has been
Yeah,
a problem all along, and nobody has
yeah,
done anything about it.
right,
So like,
right.
why now? Like, why not 2 years ago? So what's
Yeah,
happening now that all of a sudden incentives need to be aligned?
I think it was comfort. Like I think it was people like knowing that they didn't need to change, and I think you still saw it. Like I think there are examples of companies that have been really really smart with pricing, right? And you see it when new companies like enter a market. Like one of my favorite examples was Zoom entering the video conferencing market. Like all the other competitors there had these free plans that would let like two people meet, and like it was just like a very ineffective use of the tool. Like you couldn't really see how like Cisco WebEx worked with like your whole team on the call in their free plan. Same with GoToMeeting. Zoom comes in, they let you meet with up to like 50 or 100 people, but they cut the meeting to 40 minutes. And I think like being really thoughtful with your usage limits and the features that you are like letting people use is one way to do that and has been one way to do that. And I think that's been kind of like the key up until now when it comes to pricing and packaging is making sure that the combination that you have of usage and features is better than your competitors, right? And so I think that there are certain ways that companies have been able to do that, but as it relates to disrupting like the entire per seat model, like I don't think that there was enough momentum over like 2 or 3 years ago for companies to be incentivized to do that. But now they've got to be rethinking it because they know that there's going to be like an AI native company that pops up in its space that charges based on number of hours of meetings saved or something like that. Like who knows?
100%.
Yeah.
So I literally had this conversation with another CEO like 2 days ago. And his company is in the business of generating this documents for certifications, right? And he was like, and they charge per seat. And he can see it. He can smell it, in the horizon coming his way. The hordes of YC graduates, AI agent companies are just going to just prompt their way into their business.
Yeah.
And destroy the seed model. Like, you don't need a seed for this. This can all be done by AI agents. Boom, done, right?
For sure.
So there was this enough impetus to change. And he's trying to figure out how to disrupt himself. And there is real revenue being paid right now by multi-year agreements on a per seat basis. And how do you, what is the Indiana Jones moment? Remember when he took the statue and he put a rock on top?
Yeah.
How do you do that in SaaS seat pricing?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think the short answer for me is that I think it's just going to depend on what space you're in. I don't think it's going to hit all at once for everybody.
Mm.
But I think
is it because of long-term contracts or because of people's a willingness to pay or
partly,
or the CFOs not used to one the other?
I mean, I also think stickiness is still real. Ripping, I work at HubSpot. We've been trying to rip out Salesforce for 5 years, and sure, it's successful sometimes, and we definitely charge less than Salesforce most of the time. And if the equation was that easy, then we'd have displaced a lot more Salesforce, right? But SaaS products are sticky, especially when you have a ton of data in them and you don't want to go through a massive project to to rethink that. So I think it's going to have to be such a no-brainer that companies will just be willing to do that, because I think stickiness is still real. There are I think more or less commoditized products. If I were Zoom, I would be trying to figure out how can I align my incentives so that some up and coming video conferencing company that's AI native and doesn't charge per seat doesn't come and just rip all of our customers out. Because Zoom, as you've seen, has been trying to move into a stickier place forever. They've tried to become kind of almost a Slack competitor. They've tried to become a Google Workspace competitor, but I don't think anybody actually uses Zoom for that.
They have an outlook. Yeah. They have an outlook.
Totally. And so I'd be a little bit worried if I was in a space like that, just because there will be new companies in those spaces that have different incentive models that I think will be disruptive. But yeah.
Well, whether you make the new breed of CRM that are coming out that are more AI native, like Day or Adio.
So Day, and I know the guys from Day pretty well. I know Mike and I know C. Todd from back in the day at HubSpot. Those guys are amazing. I haven't had a look at it yet because PricingSaaS isn't big enough to use it yet. Pichu is you're gonna have to wait. But Adio, I've heard very good things about. Again, I think they, and I think this happened with HubSpot. But I think HubSpot CRM grew off of new business, off of startups, right? And they were targeting startups. And I think that's part of the reason that they went to market with a freemium model. We obviously, displace other CRMs as well. But I think because of how sticky CRMs are, I think that's going to be the key for a lot of these AI native CRMs too, is they're going to grow on top of this new kind of AI native SaaS company, or just companies in general that are using their CRM. At least until they prove that their product is great, and then they can start ripping out.
So if you were to work for them, what will you do? If you were their growth guy, will you replay the same HubSpot playbook, or will you do something?
Man, I don't know. I think what Michael and Chris O'Donnell are doing at Day is really smart. They are combining they have this really wide TAM, right? They haven't limited themselves with who they're going after, which I think can be scary. But then they have a very high touch onboarding process, which I think kind of mitigates that a little bit. So they don't let everybody in because they want people to have a successful experience. So they're not limiting themselves, but they're limiting the amount of people that get access. So they're creating kind of exclusivity a little bit, almost like Superhuman did with email.
Right, I was gonna say that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a smart way to approach it. Because at the end of the day, I think Day, Adio, they're early companies. I think you need to figure out who does the best with it, how you can build the product in the best way possible. I think what they're doing right now is pretty smart, and I wouldn't change too much. I like the idea, especially with a small team, of kind of keeping things small. I don't think Day's raised a ton of money. I know they raised from Sequoia. They don't have tons of pressure, I don't think, to ramp up insanely fast. I like the high touch model that they're doing right now. I think that's smart. Random question for you: what are you reading about AI agents right now? Where are you getting your information from? I'd love to just, because I feel like you guys know so much about this. I'd just be curious, if you guys have any sources that you're reading. Regularly.
That's really interesting. That's a great question, because I was looking. So when I came out with this epiphany of what's going on with agents and how are they taking their wares to market, right? How they're monetizing it. There was nothing out there. And it wasn't until I started calling people, like calling the AI agent builders and asking them directly that question, like, how are you thinking about your go-to-market? How are you thinking about the values track? How are you thinking about your contracts? That I started taking notes of like what's happening where. So there's nothing to read. Like we're literally putting the content together as we go because we're talking to each agent. And I'll give you actually one last one for you is that because they're investors invested in SaaS for the last 20 years, AI agent companies are trying to like mimic the same predictability of revenue of their SaaS predecessors or grandparents, because their investors are looking for the same SaaS metrics that they're looking at these agents. So they're trying to retrofit agentic work into some kind of like repeatable model, right? So the closest is not actually per transaction or some kind of like metering. Its closest is to per agent, because then you can sell an agent, which is a seat equivalent, right? And you can sell as many agents as you want. But the problem is that, I don't think that's sustainable. Eventually people want to pay for an outcome. So there's this tension, right? Of like what the company wants to do with their customers and what the customers want and what investors want. Investors want something that looks like SaaS, so they can flip it to the public markets and say, look, repeatable revenue, I can invest now.
Yeah.
So what do you make of that sort of tension, right? Customers want one thing, investors want another.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think like eventually, what is it? The customer's always right. I think the customer's going to win at some point. I think like
there's more of it.
Whatever the investors want, like they're going to come second at some point. The thing that's been crazy to me about these AI products, and I'm sure you're seeing these, like I just read about this ad product called Icon that just grew to like, I think they have like less than 10 people and they just hit like 100 million in ARR or something like that. Like that, there are these crazy companies that are,
there's a bunch of them.
Hitting nutty revenue milestones. Maybe it's not 100. I probably just misspoke, but some of these companies that are hitting crazy ARR milestones super fast are just like mind blowing to me.
Yeah. I think that's the future of AI is that these tiny companies, finding really rich niches and then just going after it and making a lot of money. That's an exciting time to live.
Yeah, exactly. Hope I can jump on that.
Yeah, exactly. Good to see you. Maybe we should start some.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
There you go. All right, Rob. It's so good to see you. Thanks again for the time.
Great to meet you, man.
Look forward to speaking to you soon. All right, man. That's it.